Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. New York City's yellow taxis. You know those iconic symbols of the city that never sleeps? Well, they might be making a comeback. It is pretty fascinating. The taxi industry has really been struggling for over a decade, especially with the rise of all those ride-sharing giants like Uber and Lyft. You've seen how the value of those once-coveted taxi medallions has plummeted. Those medallions were once worth a fortune, over $1 million. But then with all those ride-sharing apps flooding the market, their value tanked, dropped to less than $200,000. And it left a lot of taxi drivers struggling to make ends meet. But there's this new thing, congestion pricing. It was implemented back in January, and it requires drivers to pay a toll if they want to enter the busiest parts of Manhattan, specifically below 60th Street. And you know what? It's a seemingly simple change, but it's adding this crazy ripple effect. I mean, it's totally reshaping the city's transportation landscape. I mean, who would have thought that just adding a toll would make such a huge difference? This is where it gets really interesting. While taxi drivers are seeing this huge surge in business, like a 19% jump in trips just within that congestion zone, Uber and Lyft rides, they've actually dipped down 3.4% in the same area. That's crazy how that works. But why is it happening? Well, with this congestion pricing thing, it adds a 75-cent surcharge for those riding in taxis in the zone. But for Uber and Lyft users, they have to pay an extra $1.50 per ride. So that's like double. I mean, an extra 75 cents. It might not seem like a lot, but it's enough to make people really think about which service they're going to use, especially if it's just a short trip. Now, some people are saying, well, it's too early to say if taxis are actually making a comeback. I mean, after all, Uber started letting people hail yellow cabs through their app back in 2022. So is this recent increase in taxi trips like a real resurgence? Or is it just like a bounce back from the whole integration thing? It's a good point. And we're going to add a lot more data to really understand how this is all going to play out, especially longer. Okay, so to make things even more complicated, the Federal Transportation Secretary, well, they decided to pull the plug on the whole program's approval. And of course, this caused a ton of backlash, immediately. The MTA, you know, the ones who run the subway and buses in the city, well, filed a lawsuit against the Federal Department of Transportation. Their whole argument is that the tolls are actually working, like they're easing traffic in Manhattan, and they're bringing in a lot of money for public transportation, which they desperately need. So as this whole legal battle is going on, the feds are saying, hey, MTA, you got to shut down these tolls by March 21st. But then the governor of New York, no way, we're going to keep charging that $9 base there until a judge says otherwise. So it's like this big showdown, local versus federal authorities. And the fate of congestion pricing is kind of just hanging in the balance. But here's the thing. In the middle of all this legal drama, the NYC is actually showing some really promising results, like travel times across all the bridges and tunnels into Manhattan. They've gotten faster by 30% on average. That's huge. Bus speeds are getting better too. And even those super congested streets, like Canal Street, they're seeing less gridlock. So all of this is kind of suggesting that congestion pricing, maybe it actually is working the way they planned, at least for now. But of course, there are people who aren't happy about it. Some people think it's not fair to the drivers who have to pay to go into Manhattan, especially the ones who can't really afford it. Others are worried that it's just going to push all that traffic to other parts of the city, and then we'll have new congestion hotspots to deal with. And then there's the big question. Is all the money from congestion pricing actually going to improve public transportation like they promised? You know, it's like a wait and see kind of thing. But one thing's for sure, this whole congestion pricing thing, it's a really fascinating case study. It shows how cities trying to plan things out, and how sometimes even the best plans can have consequences you don't expect. Cities are always changing, and the solutions we come up with today, it might need to be adjusted or even completely changed tomorrow. So what does this all mean for you? Whether you're a New Yorker dealing with all of this firsthand, or just someone who's interested in how cities work. The things we're learning here in New York, they could really shape the future of transportation in cities all over the world. It makes you think about the challenges and opportunities that come with making transportation systems better, more sustainable, more fair. I mean, who knows? Maybe your city will be the next one to try something like this.